Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about it in terms of metaphors because I like to think that way. And if you thought of the market as an orchestra, you have the NASDAQ and the tech and the FANG stocks building to a crescendo. But if you look at the small caps and the regional banks and the transportation, which is truly they're more like they rally, they drift. They rally, they drift, almost like a pentameter. So you have two sections of the orchestra going on. And obviously people are paying attention to the crescendo, but they also should be paying attention to the pentameter, which is really what we call the inside of the US market. Well, again, we've talked about this before. The pockets of strength have to do more with the stay-at-home philosophy and technology. But when you're talking about supply and demand, manufacturing, goods moving, people traveling, rails, etc., banking, especially in the financial, especially these regional banks, as we were saying, because that really shows how the communities, the more rural communities, are doing commerce, and that's all low. That's where you see the stress. And to me, it's really a question of, can they be pulled up if the economy truly is going to improve, or is it telling us that this is just some sort of an aberration here that we're seeing with tech and everything is just one match away from blowing up? Well, some people are kind of referring to this back to the dot-com bubble where tech went crazy and the space got very, very crowded. And it's possible that we're heading in that direction again. Obviously the Federal Reserve has done its very big part at keeping the market solvent. But I always keep looking at the risk-off indicators, particularly gold, which we've also talked about, which is going up in tandem with NASDAQ. Now, that's not totally unusual, but what makes it very, very interesting right now is that I think it reflects where the smart money is also going, and that is into the risk-off or gold, just in case things blow up. Whether or not the money supply gets out of control and we spark some kind of an inflationary environment, whether or not all the geopolitical action that we have, not just in this country, but in other countries as well, starts to flare up. That's why I think gold is sort of like the little bit of the common sense reminder that things may not be all that great in the land of Oz. When you have a burgeoning money supply like we have, and you have the dollar now starting to fall down a little bit, and you have helicopter money really basically creating a situation where people are starting to spend money. There was just a surprise recently that consumers are not, even though they're saving more, they're also spending money because they're getting stimulus checks and they're buying that not on essentials, but on things that they want. All of this portends to a potential stagflationary environment. And I think, to me, I've been calling for this for a while, but I think that's really where we're going over the next 6 months to a year, which is stagflation. Well, we have increased along the way, and now that the prices are at this other level, I feel like you have a bit of a proving ground here for gold in spot gold, 1,770 and 1,800. So I would say if you're already in, great. If you wanted to get in, I'd almost feel better seeing gold top 1,800 an ounce, because I think from 1,800 an ounce, we can actually go to 2,000 and maybe even 2,200 very quickly. So that would be my advice, is sort of hold now, maybe not get too long, but look at the potential of a parabolic move over 1,800. But I like silver right now. That's where I'm actually looking for an add. Silver has an industrial use. It also is a hedge against inflation. So going back to actually when I started in the business, which was, I hate to say when, but it was a long time ago, when gold and silver were both rallying, silver was rallying not because of its industrial usage. It was rallying because of the fact that inflation was starting to pick up. So there's this thing called the silver-gold ratio. And right now, silver is still well underperforming gold, but it's holding its own. If we start to see that flip a little bit, where silver starts to move up in terms of the ratio and starts performing better than the gold does percentage-wise, then I think you have not only an opportunity in silver, but you have another good warning sign that inflation might be rearing its head. Today, China came out and said that they wanted to make sure that the soybeans weren't affected with coronavirus, because they've had problems with that with some of the goods that have come from the United States, particularly with Tyson meats. So soybeans, though, is a really good grain to look at for, again, some inflationary indicators. Also really important to see just how serious this phase one deal between China and the United States is, because soybeans would be one of the major crops that China would buy, because obviously they're very dependent on their food chain is from soybeans, a soy-based diet. So I like to watch the soybeans, all the agriculture, wheat, corn, sugar even, all of these things have been at 100-year lows to equities in terms of ratio. So to me, that's the best opportunity yet, is if they're bottoming out, can they actually start moving up? And if they move up, do they move up so quickly that it would be at like almost a blinding speed? Right now, there's a sort of a double-edged sword, because you have a low production because of the coronavirus, but also that means that you're really looking at a rising demand. The one thing that everybody has in common throughout the world is the need to eat. So that I do believe that even if first of all, the second wave is not really affecting business per se at this point. They are not going to gauge this as a danger unless we see an increase in death rate. And increase of actual case rate is not affecting the market at all, because businesses are not going to close. If we get into a Spanish flu situation, that's very different. Then obviously, if we start to see a surge in death, things will change. So given everything staying at the status quo, I believe that the grains and the food, even with the supply chain disruptions and the low labor force, are going to increase in demand, and that we actually will start to see the food prices go up. And that's kind of like my last piece of the puzzle of this whole stagflation scenario.